The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Willowbrook Manor, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors. Emma Richardson stood at the window of her daughter's bedroom, watching the gardens below where little Sophie used to chase butterflies just weeks ago. The silence in the house felt overwhelming, broken only by the distant sound of her husband David's footsteps in the hallway. Emma had always been the strong one in their family. As a successful pediatric surgeon, she had dedicated her life to saving children, never imagining that she would be powerless to save her own. Sophie, their bright 7-year-old daughter with curly golden hair and infectious laughter, had been the light of their lives. She had a way of making everyone around her smile, from the mailman who always saved her special stickers to the elderly neighbor Mrs. Henderson, who baked cookies just to see Sophie's delighted face. The diagnosis had come like a thunderbolt on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Sophie had been complaining of headaches for a few days, nothing that seemed serious at first. Emma, with all her medical training, had initially attributed it to too much screen time or perhaps needing glasses. But when Sophie collapsed during her dance recital, everything changed in an instant. Pediatric brain tumor. The words still echoed in Emma's mind, even though it had been 3 months since that devastating day. 3 months of treatments, hospital visits, brave smiles, and sleepless nights. Sophie had fought with the courage of a warrior, never complaining even when the chemotherapy made her beautiful curls fall out. She would wear her colorful scarves and hats like crowns, telling everyone she was a princess on a special mission. David appeared in the doorway, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. His dark hair was uncombed, and his eyes were red-rimmed from another sleepless night. He was a prominent architect, known for designing some of the city's most beautiful buildings, but lately he seemed to have lost interest in creating anything. The blueprints on his desk at home remained untouched, gathering dust like everything else that once brought him joy. The lawyer called, David said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The Sophie Richardson Foundation paperwork is ready for our signatures. They had decided to start a foundation in their daughter's memory, dedicated to funding research for pediatric brain tumors and supporting families going through similar battles. Emma nodded without turning from the window. She would have loved that, she said, her voice catching. Remember how she always wanted to help other children? Even in the hospital, she would share her toys with kids who had none. The memory brought both comfort and pain. Sophie had possessed an old soul, wise beyond her years, yet maintaining the pure innocence that made childhood magical. She had befriended every child in the pediatric ward, organizing impromptu tea parties with her stuffed animals and making sure no one felt alone. The hospital staff had fallen in love with her spirit, and many of them had attended her funeral, sharing stories of how she had brightened their difficult days. David walked over and stood beside his wife, both of them looking out at the garden where Sophie's swing still moved gently in the breeze. I keep expecting to hear her voice calling for us, he admitted. Yesterday, I thought I heard her laughing in her playroom, but it was just the wind chimes she made us hang outside her window. Emma finally turned to face her husband, seeing her own grief reflected in his eyes. They had been married for 10 years, and Sophie had been their miracle baby after years of struggling with infertility. Every moment with her had felt precious, but they had assumed they would have a lifetime to create memories. Now, they were left with 7 beautiful years that felt both like a lifetime and not nearly enough. The grief counselor said it's normal, Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. She said we might hear her or feel her presence for a while. Part of the healing process. David reached for Emma's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become their lifeline over these past few weeks. I don't know how to do this, Em. How do we go on without her? Everything we planned, everything we dreamed about, it all included Sophie. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of their shared loss. They had been planning Sophie's 8th birthday party when she passed away. The invitations were still in Emma's desk drawer, addressed, but never sent. The unicorn-themed decorations they had ordered were stored in the garage, too painful to look at but too meaningful to throw away. I went to her school yesterday, Emma said quietly. Mrs. Patterson wanted to show me the memory books Sophie's classmates made. Every child drew a picture or wrote a letter about their favorite memory with her. She paused, struggling to continue. There were so many stories I didn't even know. About how she helped Tommy with his math homework every day, or how she always invited the new kids to sit with her at lunch. David squeezed her hand tighter. She was extraordinary, wasn't she? Not just because she was ours, but truly special. Emma nodded, tears finally beginning to fall. The hardest part is that she knew, David. Near the end, she knew what was happening, but she spent her time trying to comfort us. She made me promise that I wouldn't stop helping other children, and she made you promise that you would still build beautiful buildings because the world needs beautiful things. They stood in silence for a while, holding each other as they watched clouds drift across the sky that Sophie used to say looked like cotton candy. The house around them held so many memories in every corner. The kitchen where Sophie had learned to make pancakes, always insisting on heart-shaped ones. The living room where she had built elaborate forts out of cushions and blankets. The staircase where she used to slide down the banister despite their gentle scolding. I keep thinking about what she said in the hospital, David said eventually. About how love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes shape. She was 7 years old, and she understood something that we're struggling to grasp. Emma smiled through her tears, remembering that conversation. Sophie had been so matter-of-fact about it, as if she were explaining something as simple as why the sky was blue. She had told them that love was like energy, and energy couldn't be destroyed, only transformed. Maybe that's what we need to focus on, Emma said. Not the fact that she's gone, but how our love for her continues to exist and grow. As the day progressed, friends and family members continued to stop by, bringing casseroles and condolences, their own eyes filled with tears for the little girl who had touched so many lives. Emma's mother had moved in temporarily to help with daily tasks, understanding that simple things like grocery shopping or answering the phone felt insurmountable in their current state of grief. Sophie's best friend Lily came by with her mother, carrying a small potted sunflower. Sophie always said sunflowers were happy flowers, Lily explained seriously, her 6-year-old face solemn with the weight of loss she was only beginning to understand. She told me that if something ever happened to her, I should plant sunflowers so she could see them from heaven and know that we're okay. The gesture broke something open in both Emma and David's hearts, the pure love and wisdom of children cutting through their adult complexity of grief. They planted the sunflower together in Sophie's garden, next to the fairy house David had built for her last summer. As they worked with their hands in the soil, they felt the first small glimmer of something that might eventually become peace. That evening, as they sat in Sophie's room reading through cards and letters from friends, family, and even strangers who had heard their story, Emma found a letter addressed to them in Sophie's careful handwriting. Hidden behind her jewelry box, it was clearly something she had written during one of her final hospital stays. Dear Mommy and Daddy, it began in purple crayon. If you are reading this, it means I had to go to heaven earlier than we planned. Please don't be too sad for too long. I will be watching over you and sending you signs that I'm okay. Look for butterflies and rainbows and falling stars. I will try to visit you in your dreams. Remember all the happy times we had, and please keep helping other kids like you helped me. I love you bigger than the whole universe. Your daughter forever, Sophie. The letter contained her characteristic misspellings, and the backward R she had never quite mastered, making it even more precious. At the bottom, she had drawn a family picture with all of them surrounded by hearts and flowers, with angel wings drawn on her own figure. As Emma and David held the letter between them, reading it over and over, they felt something shift in their grief. The pain was still there, as sharp and overwhelming as before, but alongside it was something else, something that felt like the beginning of healing. Sophie's words reminded them that their love story wasn't ending. It was simply entering a new chapter, one where they would learn to carry their love for her in a different way. The night sky outside Sophie's window was clear and filled with stars, the same stars she used to make wishes on during their evening walks. Emma and David made a silent promise to their daughter that they would find a way to honor her memory, to channel their grief into something meaningful that would help other families facing similar challenges. Part 2 3 weeks after finding Sophie's letter, Emma stood in the hallway of Children's Memorial Hospital, the same place where she had spent countless hours during Sophie's treatment. Today, however, she wasn't here as a grieving mother but as a doctor returning to work. The familiar smell of antiseptic and the sound of medical equipment humming in the background brought back a flood of memories, both professional and deeply personal. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the chief of pediatric oncology and Sophie's former doctor, approached Emma with a gentle smile. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Dr. Martinez had become more than Sophie's doctor during those final months. She had become a friend, someone who understood the delicate balance between hope and reality that families in their situation faced every day. Emma nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her stethoscope. I need to be here, she said. Sophie made me promise I wouldn't stop helping children. This is how I honor that promise. The pediatric ward looked exactly the same as it had during Sophie's stays, with its colorful murals of cartoon characters and motivational posters. But now Emma saw it through different eyes. She noticed the exhausted parents sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, the siblings playing quietly in corners while their brother or sister received treatment, the brave faces that children put on for their family's sake. Her first patient was a 5-year-old boy named Marcus who needed surgery to remove his appendix. His parents were beside themselves with worry, even though the procedure was routine. Emma found herself drawing on her recent experience with fear and uncertainty as she explained the surgery to them, her voice carrying a depth of understanding that hadn't been there before Sophie's illness. I know how scary this feels, she told Marcus's mother, Mrs. Johnson, as they sat in the family consultation room. When your child is sick, it feels like your whole world is falling apart. But I want you to know that Marcus is in excellent hands, and this surgery will help him feel much better. Mrs. Johnson looked into Emma's eyes and saw something there that went beyond medical expertise. You understand, don't you? Really understand. Emma paused for a moment, considering how much to share. I recently lost my daughter to a brain tumor, she said quietly. So yes, I understand the fear that comes with seeing your child in pain. But I also understand how strong children can be, and how much love can carry us through the darkest times. The conversation continued for another hour, with Emma providing not just medical information, but emotional support born from her own journey through the healthcare system as a parent. She shared practical advice about staying in hospital rooms, about advocating for their child's comfort, about maintaining hope while facing reality. Meanwhile, David was in his office downtown, staring at architectural plans that held no meaning for him. His business partner, James, had been patient for weeks, but David could see the concern growing in his eyes as projects fell behind, and client meetings were rescheduled repeatedly. Maybe you should take more time, James suggested gently. The Henderson project can wait another month. David shook his head, remembering Sophie's words about building beautiful things. No, I need to work. Sophie believed that beautiful buildings could make people happy, even during difficult times. I want to design something in her memory, something that will bring joy to families like ours. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching, his hand moving across the page with more purpose than it had in months. The design that emerged was for a family center adjacent to Children's Memorial Hospital, a place where families could stay during long treatments, where siblings could play and do homework, where parents could find moments of peace and connection with others facing similar challenges. The building in his mind would have large windows to let in natural light, gardens where children could play safely, and quiet spaces for families to process their emotions. He envisioned a library filled with books about courage and hope, a kitchen where families could prepare meals together, and sleeping quarters that felt more like home than like hospital accommodations. As David worked on the design, he felt Sophie's presence guiding his pencil. She had always loved to watch him draw, sitting beside him at his drafting table and asking endless questions about why buildings needed to be strong and beautiful at the same time. Because people's hearts need beauty to heal, he had told her once, not realizing how prophetic those words would become. Back at the hospital, Emma was finishing her rounds when she encountered a family that made her heart stop. The Petrosky family was gathered around 8-year-old Anna's bed, their faces showing the same mixture of hope and desperation that Emma remembered so well. Anna had the same type of brain tumor that Sophie had battled, and she was at the same stage of treatment where Sophie had been when they first received the diagnosis. Anna's mother, Lisa, looked up as Emma entered the room. "Are you Dr. Richardson? Dr. Martinez said you might want to meet us." There was something in her voice that suggested she knew about Sophie, that she understood they were connected by more than just medical circumstance. Emma sat down beside Anna's bed, looking at the little girl who was coloring despite the 4 tubes in her arm. "Hi, Anna," she said softly. "That's a beautiful picture. What are you drawing?" "It's my family," Anna said with a weak but genuine smile. "And this is our dog Buster. He's not allowed to visit me here, but Mommy shows me pictures every day." She held up her coloring book, pointing to each figure with pride. Emma's heart ached with recognition. Sophie had done the same thing, always drawing pictures of their family, always including their cat Whiskers, even though pets weren't allowed in the hospital. "Pets are very important family members," Emma agreed. "I bet Buster misses you too." Over the next hour, Emma found herself sharing Sophie's story with the Petrosky family, not to frighten them, but to offer hope and practical guidance. She told them about the importance of advocating for Anna's comfort, about celebrating small victories during treatment, about maintaining normal family traditions even in abnormal circumstances. Sophie loved tea parties, Emma shared, smiling at the memory. So every Friday during her treatment, I would bring a thermos of herbal tea and some cookies, and we would have tea parties right here in her hospital room. The nurses even joined us sometimes. Anna's eyes lit up at this idea. I love tea parties too. Mommy, can we do that? Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes, but also something that looked like relief. Having a plan, having something to look forward to, made the overwhelming situation feel slightly more manageable. Emma spent time explaining the treatment process from both a medical and personal perspective, helping the family understand what to expect while emphasizing that every child's journey was different. She shared the wisdom Sophie had gained during her treatment about the importance of staying connected to joy even during the hardest times. Sophie taught me that healing isn't just about medicine, Emma explained. It's about love, hope, music, laughter, art, and all the things that make us human. Don't forget to bring those things into Anna's treatment. As Emma prepared to leave, Anna called out to her, Dr. Richardson, will you come back and tell me more stories about Sophie? Emma's throat tightened with emotion. I would love that, Anna. Sophie would have liked you very much. That evening, Emma and David sat together in their kitchen, sharing their respective experiences of returning to work. David showed Emma his sketches for the family center, explaining his vision for a space that would honor Sophie's memory by helping other families. Look at this play area, David said, pointing to his drawings. I designed it with different zones for different ages, but also with sightlines so parents can always see their children while they're talking with doctors or social workers. Emma studied the plans with growing excitement. David, this is incredible. And look, if we position the family center here, she pointed to a spot on the hospital campus map. It would be right next to the pediatric oncology ward. Families could stay close to their children during treatment. They spent the evening refining David's design, combining his architectural expertise with Emma's understanding of what families actually needed during medical crises. They planned gardens where children could safely play, meditation spaces where parents could find moments of peace, and community rooms where families could support each other through shared experiences. We should include an art therapy room, Emma suggested. Sophie always said that drawing helped her feel better when she was scared. David added it to the plans immediately. And a music room. Remember how Sophie loved when the therapy dogs visited? We could have programs with animals and music and art. As they worked together on the project, Emma and David felt something they hadn't experienced since Sophie's death, a sense of purpose that went beyond their grief. They were creating something meaningful, something that would help other families facing similar challenges. The foundation they had started in Sophie's memory could fund the family center's construction and ongoing programs. Emma could use her medical connections to ensure the center met the real needs of families, while David's architectural firm could design and build it as a memorial to their daughter. Sophie would be so proud of this, Emma said, looking at the detailed plans spread across their kitchen table. She always wanted to help other kids. David nodded, remembering his daughter's generous spirit. She had such a big heart for such a small person. This center could help hundreds of families over the years. As they prepared for bed that night, Emma and David felt a shift in their grief. The pain was still there, would always be there, but alongside it was growing a sense of hope and purpose. They were learning to carry their love for Sophie forward in a way that honored her memory and helped others. They fell asleep that night holding hands, both dreaming of a beautiful building filled with love and hope, where other families would find the support and comfort they wished they had during their own darkest hours. Part 3. 2 months into their journey of healing through service, Emma and David's lives had taken on a new rhythm. The Sophie Richardson Family Center was no longer just a dream on paper. It was becoming a reality. David worked late into the evenings, perfecting every detail of the architectural plans, while Emma split her time between her patients at the hospital and working with families who were staying in temporary accommodations during their children's treatments. The first major breakthrough came when Dr. Martinez introduced them to the hospital board of directors. Emma stood before the group of administrators, doctors, and community leaders, her hands steady now as she presented their vision. David's detailed architectural renderings were displayed on screens around the conference room, showing a building that was both beautiful and functional. The Sophie Richardson Family Center isn't just about providing accommodation, Emma explained to the board. It's about recognizing that healing happens within families, not just to individual patients. When a child is seriously ill, the entire family needs support. Board member Margaret Wu, herself a mother of 3, leaned forward with interest. Dr. Richardson, can you tell us more about the specific programs you envision? Emma's voice grew stronger as she spoke about their plans. We want to offer practical support like laundry facilities, kitchen access, and internet connectivity so families can maintain some normalcy. But we also want to provide emotional support through peer counseling, children's activities for siblings, and quiet spaces for families to process their experiences together. David stood to present the architectural features. The building design prioritizes natural light and views of healing gardens. Research shows that access to nature significantly impacts patient recovery and family well-being. We've included skylights in common areas, floor-to-ceiling windows in family suites, and covered outdoor spaces for year-round use. The presentation continued for an hour, with board members asking detailed questions about funding, operations, and long-term sustainability. Emma and David had done their homework, researching similar facilities in other cities and consulting with social workers, child life specialists, and family advocates. The foundation has already raised $200,000 through private donations, David explained. But we're seeking the hospital's partnership for land use, utilities, and ongoing operational support. After deliberation, the board voted unanimously to approve the project. Margaret Wu approached them afterward with tears in her eyes. My daughter spent 6 months in this hospital when she was 4, she said quietly. I slept in my car most nights because we couldn't afford hotel stays. This center would have changed our entire experience. The news of the board's approval spread quickly through the hospital and the community. Local media picked up the story, and donations began pouring in from unexpected sources. A local construction company offered to donate materials, a landscaping firm volunteered to create the healing gardens, and dozens of individuals sent checks with notes about their own experiences with childhood illness. Emma found herself becoming the public face of the foundation, giving interviews and speaking at community events. Initially, talking about Sophie's story had been painful, but she discovered that sharing their experience helped other parents feel less alone in their struggles. During one particular radio interview, Emma spoke about the moment they realized their grief could be transformed into action. Sophie used to say that when something sad happens, you can either let it make you smaller or let it make your heart bigger, she shared. Building this center is how we're letting our hearts grow bigger. The interview was heard by Sarah Chun, an architect working in San Francisco whose own son had survived leukemia 5 years earlier. Sarah called David's office the next day, offering to volunteer her expertise in healthcare facility design. I've been looking for a way to give back, she told him. Your center could be a model for hospitals across the country. Sarah's involvement brought additional credibility and resources to the project. She had designed similar facilities and understood the complex requirements for buildings that served both healthy and immunocompromised populations. Together, she and David refined the plans to include specialized air filtration systems, easily cleanable surfaces, and flexible spaces that could adapt to different family needs. Meanwhile, Emma's work at the hospital continued to evolve. She had become an unofficial liaison between the medical staff and families facing long-term treatments. Her unique perspective as both a physician and a parent who had experienced loss made her invaluable in helping other families navigate the healthcare system. One afternoon, she was called to meet with the Rodriguez family, whose 12-year-old son Miguel was preparing for a complex heart surgery. The family spoke primarily Spanish, and previous communication attempts had been challenging despite the presence of interpreters. Emma sat with Miguel's mother, Rosa, in the family conference room, speaking in the fluent Spanish she had learned during her medical training in underserved communities. But, more than language, Emma offered something interpreters couldn't: the understanding of what it felt like to entrust your child's life to medical professionals while feeling helpless yourself. I know you're scared, Emma said gently to Rosa. When Sophie was sick, I was terrified every single day, even though I'm a doctor myself. Being a parent changes everything about how we experience medicine. Rosa began to cry, finally, able to express her fears to someone who truly understood. I keep thinking, what if something goes wrong? What if I never see him smile again? Emma held Rosa's hand, remembering similar conversations with other parents during Sophie's treatment. Miguel has an excellent surgical team, and his chances for a full recovery are very good. But I understand that statistics don't comfort a mother's heart. All we can do is love our children completely and trust in the skill of the people caring for them. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Emma explaining the surgical procedure in terms Rosa could understand and helping her prepare questions for the medical team. By the end, Rosa felt more confident about advocating for Miguel's needs and better equipped to support him through his recovery. Miguel's surgery was successful, and during his recovery, Rosa often sought out Emma for support and guidance. Their relationship represented the kind of connection Emma hoped the family center would facilitate on a larger scale, parents helping other parents through shared experience and understanding. As autumn arrived, construction on the Sophie Richardson Family Center officially began. Emma and David attended the groundbreaking ceremony, joined by dozens of families they had met through the hospital, board members, construction workers, and community supporters. Dr. Martinez spoke at the ceremony about the impact the center would have on patient care. Families are not visitors in the healing process, she said. They are essential partners. This center recognizes that truth and provides the support families need to be their strongest for their children. Emma stood before the gathered crowd, holding a photo of Sophie taken during one of her good days in the hospital, when she was wearing her favorite purple scarf and grinning despite her illness. Sophie believed that every person she met was put in her path for a reason, Emma said. She would be amazed to see how many people have come together to help other families because of her story. David spoke about the architectural features that had been inspired by Sophie's wisdom. She taught us that beauty isn't a luxury during difficult times. It's a necessity. This building will be beautiful because beauty heals hearts just as medicine heals bodies. As they broke ground together, Emma and David felt Sophie's presence strongly. The little girl who had faced her illness with such courage was now inspiring a legacy that would help countless other families. Her death had meaning beyond their personal loss. It was becoming a source of hope and healing for their entire community. The construction would take 8 months to complete, but already families were asking about staying at the center. Word had spread through social media and support groups about the facility being built specifically for families facing long-term pediatric treatments. That evening, Emma and David walked through Sophie's garden, where the sunflower lily had planted was now tall and strong, its face following the sun across the sky. They talked about the families they would soon be able to help, the children who would play in the center's gardens, the parents who would find comfort in shared spaces designed with love and understanding. "Do you think we're healing?" David asked as they sat on the bench he had built beside Sophie's memorial stone. Emma considered the question carefully. "I think we're learning to carry our grief differently," she said. "It's not getting smaller, but it's not consuming us anymore either. We're growing around it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky, the same stars Sophie had made wishes on during their evening walks. Their love for her remained as strong as ever, but now it was channeled into action that honored her memory and helped others facing similar journeys. Part 4 winter arrived early that year, covering the construction site of the Sophie Richardson Family Center with a blanket of snow. Emma stood at the hospital window, watching workers in heavy coats continue building despite the cold. The foundation walls were complete, and the framework was rising steadily into the gray sky. "Dr. Richardson?" Anna Petrosky's voice called from behind her. Emma turned to see the little girl she had met months earlier, now walking steadily down the hospital hallway, her hair growing back in soft dark curls after completing her treatment successfully. "Anna." Emma knelt down to hug the 8-year-old, whose smile was radiant with health. "You look wonderful. How are you feeling?" "I'm good. The doctors say the medicine worked, and I don't have to come back for a whole month." Anna's excitement was infectious, reminding Emma of Sophie's joy during her own brief periods of improvement. Lisa Petrosky approached with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Richardson, we can never thank you enough for everything you've done for our family." Anna still talks about the stories you told her about Sophie. Emma felt her heart swell with a mixture of joy and sadness. Anna's recovery was everything they had hoped for Sophie, yet her success didn't diminish the happiness Emma felt for this family. "Sophie would be so happy to know you're doing well, Anna. She always said that when one child gets better, it's a victory for all children." "Mommy says you're building a special house for families like ours," Anna said, her young face serious with interest. "Will it have a garden like Sophie's?" "It will," Emma promised, "with flowers that bloom all year round, and quiet places where families can think and hope and remember." As winter progressed, Emma and David found themselves busier than ever. The foundation had grown beyond their expectations, receiving donations from across the country and attracting attention from other hospitals interested in replicating their model. Emma had been invited to speak at medical conferences about the importance of family-centered care, while David's firm was consulting on similar projects in 3 other cities. The demands of their work sometimes felt overwhelming, but they found strength in each other and in the knowledge that Sophie's legacy was touching more lives than they had ever imagined. Every email from a grateful family, every donation from a stranger moved by their story, every breakthrough in the construction process felt like a gift from their daughter. One particularly memorable day in February, they received a package with no return address. Inside was a hand-knitted blanket in soft purple yarn, Sophie's favorite color, along with a note written in elderly handwriting. Dear Emma and David, my granddaughter was treated at Children's Memorial Hospital 40 years ago. She didn't survive, but the kindness of the staff and other families carried us through the darkest time of our lives. I have been knitting blankets for pediatric patients ever since, and when I read about your Sophie and the center you're building, I knew I wanted to make something special for your family. May this blanket remind you that love continues even after goodbye. With deep admiration, Eleanor Walsh, age 87. Emma and David held the blanket together, overwhelmed by the generosity of a stranger who understood their loss across decades and distance. They placed it in Sophie's room, where it joined the growing collection of cards, letters, and gifts from people whose lives had been touched by their daughter's story. March brought the beginning of spring and significant progress on the family center construction. The building's frame was complete, and workers were beginning to install the large windows that David had designed to flood the interior with natural light. Emma visited the site daily, watching their vision take physical form. During one of these visits, she was approached by James Morrison, a journalist from the city newspaper who had been following their story since the groundbreaking. Dr. Richardson, I'd like to write a feature article about the center's progress and impact. Would you and David be willing to give me an extended interview? Emma had given many interviews over the past months, but this one felt different, more comprehensive. They met with James on a Saturday morning at the construction site, with the partially completed building serving as a backdrop to their conversation. Tell me about the moment you decided to turn your grief into action, James asked, his recorder capturing their words as construction sounds echoed in the background. David answered first. It wasn't really a decision we made consciously. Sophie had always been concerned about other children, even when she was sick herself. After she died, we realized that the best way to honor her memory was to continue her mission of helping others. Emma nodded, adding, we were also motivated by our own experience as parents in the healthcare system. We saw how many families struggled with practical challenges that had nothing to do with medical care, where to sleep, how to afford food, how to maintain connections with their other children. James spent 3 hours with them, asking detailed questions about the center's design, the foundation's growth, and their personal journey through grief and healing. He also interviewed several families who had been helped by the foundation's temporary assistance programs while waiting for the center to open. The resulting article, published the following Sunday, occupied the entire front page of the newspaper's lifestyle section. Titled, Building Hope, How One Family's Loss Became a Community's Gain. It told the complete story of Sophie's illness, her parents' grief, and their transformation of that grief into a legacy of service. The article's impact was immediate and profound. The foundation's phone rang constantly with calls from people wanting to donate or volunteer. A local elementary school organized a fundraising carnival that raised $15,000. The hospital gift shop began selling purple ribbons with Sophie's Hope printed on them, with proceeds benefiting the foundation. Most meaningfully to Emma and David, they began receiving calls from other bereaved parents who wanted to turn their own losses into action. A couple whose son had died in a car accident wanted to start a foundation for teen driver safety. Parents who had lost a daughter to drowning were working to install safety equipment at public pools. Sophie's story was inspiring others to transform their grief into purpose. It's like Sophie is still teaching people, Emma told David one evening as they reviewed applications from families wanting to volunteer with the foundation. She's showing them that love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to express itself. April brought exciting news. The family center would open ahead of schedule. The construction crew had worked through the winter, motivated by the project's mission and the community support surrounding it. The building was nearing completion, and Emma and David could walk through actual rooms instead of looking at blueprints. The main lobby featured a large window looking out onto Sophie's garden, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom in carefully planned arrangements. The family suites were comfortable and homelike, each with a small kitchenette, living area, and separate sleeping spaces for parents and siblings. The children's playroom was bright and cheerful, with built-in storage for toys and books, and child-sized furniture designed for comfort and safety. Emma's favorite space was the meditation room, a quiet circular area with floor-to-ceiling windows and comfortable seating arranged in small conversation clusters. Soft lighting and nature sounds would provide a peaceful environment for families to reflect, pray, or simply sit in silence when they needed to process their emotions. David was proudest of the family dining room, where multiple families could share meals together, creating connections and support networks. He had designed the space with an open kitchen so that families could cook together if they chose, believing that sharing food was one of the most basic ways people cared for each other. As the opening date approached, Emma and David felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had poured their hearts into this project, and soon it would be tested by real families facing real crises. Would it provide the comfort and support they had envisioned? Would it truly honor Sophie's memory by helping other children and families? Their questions were answered during the center's first week of operation, when they welcomed the Patterson family. 8-year-old Jessica was undergoing treatment for a rare blood disorder, and her parents had been driving 2 hours each way from their small town for daily appointments. "This is like staying in the most beautiful hotel," Jessica's mother, Carol, said as Emma showed them to their suite. "But more than that, it feels like coming home to people who understand what we're going through." Jessica's father, Mark, was equally moved by the center's design and atmosphere. "Our daughter has been in and out of hospitals for 6 months, and this is the first place that feels like it was designed for families, not just for medical convenience." As Emma watched Jessica playing in the children's room with other young patients, she felt Sophie's presence strongly. This was exactly what her daughter would have wanted, a place where children could be children, even during the most challenging circumstances of their lives. That night, Emma and David stood in Sophie's garden behind the family center, surrounded by the sounds of families settling into their temporary home. Through the windows, they could see children doing homework at the study tables David had designed, parents talking quietly in the common areas, and siblings playing together in spaces created specifically for their needs. "We did it, Sophie," Emma whispered to the stars above. "We built something beautiful for other families, just like you wanted." Part 5. 1 year after the Sophie Richardson Family Center opened its doors, Emma stood in the main lobby, watching morning light stream through the windows onto faces that had become familiar over the months. The center was not only operating at full capacity, but had developed a waiting list of families hoping for accommodation during their children's treatments. The success had exceeded their wildest dreams, but, more importantly, it had proven that their vision of family-centered healing was not just idealistic, but essential. The center had become a model for hospitals across the country, with delegations visiting regularly to learn how to implement similar programs in their own communities. Dr. Richardson called out Maria Santos, whose 4-year-old daughter Carmen was completing her final round of chemotherapy. "Carmen has something for you." Emma knelt down to receive a carefully folded piece of construction paper from the little girl. Inside was a crayon drawing of the family center with stick figures of children playing in the garden. At the top, in Carmen's careful preschool handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for our home." "Carmen wanted to make sure Sophie knew how happy we are here," Maria explained, her eyes bright with tears of gratitude rather than sorrow. Emma hugged the little girl, remembering how Sophie had always communicated through her artwork. "Sophie can see this from heaven," she assured Carmen. "She's very happy that you feel safe and loved here." The drawing joined dozens of others in Emma's office, a collection that had grown into an impromptu gallery of children's artwork expressing their experiences at the center. Each picture told a story of hope, resilience, and the healing power of community support during medical crises. David appeared in the lobby, carrying blueprints for the center's first expansion project. The board approved the addition. He announced with a smile that reached his eyes in a way that had become more frequent over the past year. 6 more family suites and a dedicated teen area. The need for expansion had become apparent within months of opening. Families were staying longer than anticipated, not just because of complex medical treatments, but because they found comfort and community at the center that was difficult to leave. Teenagers, in particular, had requested their own space where they could connect with peers facing similar challenges. Emma looked at David's new drawings, seeing familiar attention to detail and beauty. Sophie would love the teen room design, she said, pointing to the comfortable seating areas and natural lighting. She was already showing interest in older kids' activities before she got sick. They walked together through the center's common areas, noting small improvements and changes that had emerged organically as families made the space their own. The meditation room had evolved into a multi-faith chapel where families of different backgrounds found spiritual comfort together. The family dining room had become the heart of the center, where newcomers were welcomed and experienced families shared practical advice and emotional support. In the kitchen, they found the Chun family preparing lunch for everyone, a tradition that had started when Mr. Chun, a professional chef, had wanted to give back during his daughter's treatment. The aroma of homemade soup filled the air, and families gathered around tables that David had designed to accommodate wheelchairs and medical equipment while maintaining the dignity of shared meals. Food is love made visible, Mrs. Chun often said, echoing words that Sophie had used when helping Emma cook their own family dinners. The connection between nourishment and healing had become central to the center's philosophy. Dr. Martinez appeared in the kitchen doorway, smiling at the scene of families sharing lunch together. Emma, David, do you have a moment? I have some news to share. They followed her to a quiet corner where she could speak privately. The hospital board has voted to establish the Sophie Richardson Endowment for Family-Centered Care, she announced. It will fund similar centers at children's hospitals nationwide and support research into the impact of family support on patient outcomes. Emma felt her knees go weak with the magnitude of the announcement. Dr. Martinez, that's incredible. Sophie's legacy will help children everywhere. David put his arm around Emma, both of them struggling to comprehend how their small act of transforming grief into service had grown into a movement that would impact healthcare across the country. The endowment represented not just financial support, but institutional recognition that families were essential partners in healing. There's more, Dr. Martinez continued. The American Academy of Pediatrics wants to award you both their humanitarian award at this year's national conference. Your work has changed how we think about caring for sick children. As the afternoon progressed, Emma and David found themselves reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They visited Sophie's Memorial Garden, where families often went to find peace, and where children played among flowers that bloomed year-round thanks to careful planning and greenhouse support. Anna Petrosky was there with her younger brother, both of them healthy and thriving 2 years after Anna's successful treatment. She had become something of a center mascot, visiting regularly to play with current patients and reassure worried parents that recovery was possible. Dr. Richardson, Anna called out, running over with arms full of fresh flowers from the garden. These are for Sophie's stone. I picked all the purple ones because Lily told me purple was her favorite color. Emma accepted the flowers with a heart full of gratitude for this child, whose life represented hope for all the families who came through the center's doors. Sophie would be so happy to see how well you're doing, Anna. She would want you to keep helping other children feel brave. As evening approached, the center settled into its familiar rhythm. Families gathered in the common room for the weekly support group. Teenagers claimed the newly approved teen space for their own meeting, and younger children settled in for movie night in the playroom. Emma and David stood at the main lobby window, watching snow begin to fall outside while warmth and laughter filled the building around them. The center was exactly what they had envisioned, a place where families could heal together, where children could be children despite serious illness, and where hope could flourish even during the darkest times. Do you think Sophie knows? David asked quietly, his breath fogging the cold window glass. Emma smiled, remembering their daughter's absolute certainty that love transcended physical death. I think she's been with us every step of the way, she said. Every family we've helped, every child who's found comfort here, every moment of healing that's happened in this building, she's part of all of it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching families through the windows of their temporary home. In the family dining room, parents shared stories and advice over evening tea. In the playroom, children who had never met before today were becoming friends. In the meditation room, a mother sat quietly processing the news that her son's treatment was working. The Sophie Richardson Family Center had become more than a building. It was a living memorial to a little girl whose love for others had inspired a revolution in how healthcare institutions supported families during crisis. Her parents had learned to carry their grief not as a burden, but as motivation to prevent other families from facing medical challenges alone. As they prepared to leave for the evening, Emma and David were stopped by the Morrison family, new arrivals whose 6-year-old son would begin treatment the next morning. "Thank you for creating this place," Mrs. Morrison said through tears. "We were so scared about leaving our hometown and being alone during treatment. But being here, surrounded by families who understand, makes us feel like we can face whatever comes next." Emma hugged the worried mother, remembering her own fear during Sophie's early treatments. "You're not alone," she assured her. "You're part of a family now, and families take care of each other." Walking to their car under the falling snow, Emma and David reflected on how their understanding of family had expanded over the past 2 years. They had learned that family wasn't just about blood relationships, but about love, support, and shared experience. The center had become an extended family for hundreds of children and parents facing medical challenges. Their love for Sophie remained as strong as ever, but it had grown beyond personal grief into something larger and more purposeful. Every family helped, every child comforted, every parent supported was an expression of their continuing love for their daughter. As they drove home through the quiet city streets, Emma and David felt a peace they hadn't experienced since before Sophie's diagnosis. Their daughter's death had been transformed from a source of overwhelming sorrow into a foundation for boundless hope. Love, as Sophie had promised, had indeed changed shape but never diminished. The Sophie Richardson Family Center stood behind them in the night, its warm windows glowing like beacons of hope for families facing uncertain futures. Inside, children slept peacefully in beds designed with love, parents found strength in community support, and healing happened one family at a time. Sophie's legacy lived on, not in sadness but in joy, not in ending but in countless new beginnings, not in goodbye but in the eternal hello of love that continues to grow and touch lives across the world.